Welcome to AYSK, All You Should Know, your go-to source for breaking stories, trending cases, and the facts that matter most. We don't do rumors, we bring you verified, in-depth reporting on the biggest stories just as they unfold. I'm your host, Ayonfe, and this is everything you should know. On October 7, 2023, militants from Gaza launched a large-scale attack into southern Israel. That day changed everything and launched a conflict that 2 years on has reshaped lives, diplomacy, and the region. In this episode of All You Should Know, we trace the timeline from the first attack through the latest ground operations in September 2025. We explain the human cost, the long-running hostage negotiations, and how the war has spilled across borders into Lebanon and beyond. I'm Ayonfe. Let's start at the beginning. October 7, 2023, the opening shock. Armed militants from Gaza led by Hamas launched a major cross-border assault into southern Israel, hitting communities in a music festival. Israeli authorities reported large numbers of dead and around 240 to 250 hostages taken into Gaza. These assaults triggered Israel's full-scale military campaign. October to December 2023, massive Israeli response. Israel undertook sustained aerial bombardment and localized ground operations in Gaza. Urban infrastructure was heavily damaged and thousands of civilians were killed or displaced as northern and southern population centers became battle zones. January 2024, temporary passes, fragile truces. Through early 2024, there were intermittent ceasefires, partial hostage exchanges, and enormous humanitarian prayer. Some pauses allowed limited aid, but each pause proved fragile. 2024, continued bombardment shifting front. Fighting continued across Gaza through 2024 with periodic large ground operations, intense airstrikes, and repeated international calls for humanitarian access. Hostage exchanges and negotiations continued in feet and stats. Early 2025, negotiation pushes and localized escalations. Mediators, chiefly Qatar and Egypt with US backing, pursued proposals for phased ceasefires tied to hostages and prisoner swaps. These talks saw occasional progress but kept getting disrupted by new incidents or military moves. July to August 2025, renewed diplomatic push. A notable ceasefire proposal surfaced mid-August 2025 that suggested a phased 60-day truce with phased hostage releases and prisoner swaps. Reports said Hamas had indicated acceptance of aspects of the proposal, while details remained subject to negotiation. Mediators continued to press for an implementable deal. Intensified ground assault on Gaza City. In mid-September 2025, Israel launched a major intensified ground push focused on Gaza City and opened a temporary evacuation corridor for civilians for a 48-hour window. International agencies warned of famine conditions in northern Gaza after crossings and routes for aid were closed or rendered unsafe. Reported Palestinian deaths by mid-September 2025 surpassed 65,000 according to Gaza health authorities. The humanitarian situation was described as catastrophic by the UN and other aid groups. The conflict is not being a single campaign, but a sequence of offensives, temporary pauses, mediations, and local escalations. Each pause changed the battlefield, the civilian geography of displacement, and the diplomatic opening for a durable deal. Humanitarian impact, scale, and numbers. By what we can verify, as at mid-September 2025, Gaza health authorities put the death toll at more than 65,000 Palestinians since October 2023. Injuries and displacement run into the hundreds of thousands and millions displaced at various points. Independent verification in active war zones is limited. Still, multiple UN agencies and humanitarian groups confirm the scale of civilian suffering is enormous. Famine and aid access. The UN warned in September 2025 that northern Gaza, including Gaza City, faced famine conditions after key crossings were closed and aid movements became near impossible. Fuel, food, and medical supplies were critically low, and many hospitals had been damaged or forced to evacuate patients. Humanitarian agencies repeatedly called for safe, sustained corridors for aid, hospitals, water, electricity, and displacement. front. Prolonged strikes damaged infrastructure, electricity grids, water systems, and hospitals. Generators ran out of fuel, medical supplies dwindled. The result? A protracted multidimensional humanitarian crisis with both immediate casualties and looming deaths from hunger, untreated illness, and lack of sanitation. International calls for access went largely unmet on many fronts. Hostage talks. What started it and the stakes? The hostages taken on October 7, 2023 became a central political and emotional lever. Israel insisted that the return of hostages is core to any pause. Hamas used hostages as leverage to seek mass prisoner releases. That dynamic has anchored the diplomatic track, ceasefire proposals, and phased releases. Mediators, Qatar, Egypt with US engagement pushed a plan that envisioned a phased release of hostages over weeks in exchange for a temporary truce. Hamas reportedly accepted a version of the 60-day framework in August 2025, but implementation required trust, security guarantees, and verification, all extremely fragile. Why implementation breaks down? Implementation can't collapse because military operations near hostage sites risk killing hostages or endangering them. Mutual mistrust over whether the other side will honor phased releases. New attacks or strikes that derail momentum. Domestic political prayers inside each country pushing leaders to add in positions. Regional spillovers: Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran. Lebanon Hezbollah front. Since the October 2023 escalation, the Israel-Lebanon border has been a second front. Hezbollah, backed politically and materially by Iran, has periodically exchanged rocket and artillery fire with Israel. These periodic cross-border fights raised real fears of a wider regional confrontation. Recent statements and moves in September 2025 show that Lebanon remains a political prayer point and source of potential escalation. Iran and proxy networks. Iran remains a strategic backer of proxies and militant groups across the region. The conflict dynamics, including designation of certain militias as terrorist groups, reflects efforts to contain proxies and signal penalties to Iran and its networks. The risk is that a single large cross-border campaign could draw multiple state and non-state actors deeper into direct confrontation. Wider regional incident. The war also saw strikes and incidents beyond the Israel-Gaza-Lebanon frame. Attacks on shipping in the Red Sea by Houthi forces, strikes attributed to the Iran-linked groups, and diplomatic tensions, for instance, strikes affecting mediation venues like Doha at times. These incidents complicated mediation and raised the cost of allowing the conflict to fester. What to watch for next? Aid corridors and crossings. Whether northern Gaza receives sustained protected convoys. Hostage deal announcement. Any Qatar or Egypt or US statement about phased releases or signed understandings. Scale of ground operations. IDF operational briefings and independent confirmation of movements in Gaza City and surrounding areas. Lebanon or Hezbollah activity. Large-scale exchanges or a mass escalation would be a major regional inflection point. This conflict is dense with history, politics, and human tragedy. For listeners who want to go deeper, we've linked the primary sources in the episode notes, so you can read the reporting and official statements we used to build today's episode. I'll be tracking the top developments and will bring you updates as the story evolves. If this episode helped you understand the picture, please subscribe and share. Hayanfe. See you on the next episode of All You Should Know. Thanks for listening to AYSK, All You Should Know. Stay informed, stay sharp, and don't miss our next episode as we continue to follow the stories shaping the world around you. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and remember, truth lives here.